Hello and welcome to CBA, Horn of Africa's leading television and the first broadcast in English. You are now watching Talk to CBA program where we feature representatives of different institutions and bodies to get different perspectives of issues we think is of interest to our audience. And now more than ever, we are joined by the Secretary General of the Somali Journalist Syndicate, Ahmed Mumin, to discuss the state of the media in Somalia amid the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you very much, Ahmed Mumin, for joining us. First of all, amid the COVID-19 pandemic and the free flow of news and the information is more essential than ever, as we all know, to ensure open dialogue and the exchange of vital information. If the Somali Journalist Syndicate has been closely monitoring the press freedom restrictions, could you tell us the state of the media during the pandemic?
Thank you, Eunice, and I thank also the team with CBA TV for having me today to this program. Since the start of COVID-19, it has been a very tough and challenging time for the Somali journalists. You know the situation in Somalia for the press freedom and for the journalists has been deteriorating in the past 2 or 3 years, not only because of the journalists were restricted from access to information, but also the practice and the intimidation against the journalists has been on the rise in the past 3 years. What we have seen recently during the pandemic was that the Somali authorities were reluctant to release the needed information to the public through the media. Number one, the journalists and the media houses were not given adequate time and the resources to do this because of the Minister of Health in the beginning did not give substantial and full information about the spread and the measures that the authorities are taking to control the pandemic. Number two, quite a number of journalists and their media houses were either asked, restricted what they have been writing about the COVID-19. We have about 4 cases since mid-June, mid-March, where editors and journalists were asked to remove articles and news items about COVID-19. We have also been in contact with the media houses and the journalists to know the motive about this incident. And we have shockingly realized that at the beginning, the Somali authorities did not want the information of COVID-19 to freely move out to the public, including the numbers that were considered to have a positive case in the country. The death toll, all these things were something that the government did not want to go out to the public. We have also seen that maybe it could be that the government was not quite prepared for this situation in the beginning. You know that the first measures from the government was the suspension of the international flights, meaning that the government and the authorities had an intention only that this is a foreign thing coming from out of the country. So they didn't realize that this was something could be local transmission. And that's something that they faulted on the media. Journalists were not even given access to the cases and how the authorities were trying to release this to the public, because we have seen that there is a daily update coming from the Minister of Health. But if you look back, the numbers that they were giving, they were only giving the numbers, total numbers about confirmed cases. But we, the journalists, we have been asking them how they were feeling about this briefing from the Minister of Health. And then we found that journalists were telling us, this is like a blackout of information blackout. It's like they were not telling the number of the total number of those who were screened. This was quite different from Puntland and Somaliland. And I'm just looking into the situation in Mogadishu, that it was quite tough for the media and the journalists in general during the pandemic.
And now, Mr. Mumin, what about the safety of journalists when covering news related to the pandemic? From your observation at the Somali Journalist Syndicate, are the members of the press you represent aware of what to do and how to go about their work during this time?
That's a good question. There was no specific consideration for the journalists, the media houses, when it comes to their journalists operating or covering COVID-19. I remember 4 cases where journalists were blocked by the police, and at least 2 of them were taken even to the police station for covering how authorities were trying to feed to the public, because in the beginning, that there was quite somehow of panic. People were running to the supermarkets, to the pharmacies, buying in a panic way the masks, gloves, sanitizers. All these things were like the demand was high in the local markets, and the price was going up. So certain number of journalists and their media houses were trying to know what was going on, but it was like the authorities did not want this information to go out to the public. We have also had one case where a journalist was taken to the prison because of writing an allegation about that the Somali president had taken away a donated ventilator from a local hospital. And we have seen that this journalist was not charged, but based on what he was writing, the authorities were quite sensitive. They were angry about putting the name of the president into his article and news item. All these things were like authorities were not like quite happy what the journalists and the media has. And interestingly, I want to make sure that it is the work of the journalists to write stories about such outbreak whenever there is one. Journalists, number one, are trying to get this information. They are trying to be part of the solution. Journalists are not trying to harm the society. They are trying to be part of the solution. But unfortunately, the Somali government and the authorities in general do not see the situation as this.
The Somali media fraternity this week signed a historic memorandum of understanding with the Somali Bar Association to unconditionally defend the rights of journalists and the press freedom, as well as to provide legal awareness for the professional journalists and media houses in Somalia. Could you kindly elaborate to us and to our viewers what the Memorandum of Understanding entails?
That's a good question. Early this month, we had a protest during the World Press Freedom Day on May 3. This was an occasion internationally held to commemorate the efforts of the media houses worldwide, and also to highlight the challenges the media and the journalists worldwide are facing. In Somalia, we had also an opportunity to raise some kind of awareness, but also to make a complaint to the government. We have written to the top authorities, including the Office of the President, Office of the Prime Minister, and the Minister of Information of the Federal Republic of Somalia. We sent a 3-page letter which highlighted our points of complaint, including the arbitrary arrests, the detention is targeted to the media houses, and also obstruction of access to information, which we believe that it has been an increase since April 2019. And if you look back into the data we had, starting from May 2019 to May 2020, it was a very worrying trend. That's why we decided also to submit the complaint, but also to talk to our lawyer and to file a case to the Somali local court, especially the Supreme Court, so that they can listen to our case. We are still working on this, but we think that if this case is filed to the court at the best time, it will bring some change, some relief to the Somali endangered journalists and their media houses. Number one, the right is we are trying to talk to the media, to the government, is a constitutional right, including Article 18 of the Somali Constitution, which guarantees the press freedom, and also Article 32, if you look at the Somali Constitution, also guarantees access to information. So these are all basic constitutional rights which the Somali government and their authorities should respect to. So whenever the government violates this constitutional rights, it is the right of the citizen to go to the court and to file a case against the government. And in this case, the respondents of our case are the police, the security sector, the cabinet, and the Minister of Information. Because we are trying and we believe that they are responsible to what we are trying to achieve and what we are trying to get from the government. That's why we filed this case, and we hope that this will bring some relief, and at least also to show also that there is a rule of law in this country, that no one is above the law. Even if he is the minister or if he is a senior police officer, no one should be above the law.
Your historic memorandum of understanding, the one we talked about with the Somali Bar Association, comes at a time when the president of the federal government of Somalia, Mohamed Abdalle Farmajo, promised to outlaw the penal code, which has been used against our colleagues in the industry for a very long time. Is this good news to you?
Number one, I believe, and my organization as a journalist and the Secretary General of Somali Journalist Syndicate, I believe this was a lip service diplomatic words. It was not a concrete solution to the problems and the challenges the Somali journalists are facing. Number one, such a law like the penal code to be amended, it is not up to the president. It is up to the judiciary. It is up to the Minister of Justice. It has to go to procedures, known procedures, to be reviewed this case, and then this law should go, the amendment, should go to the parliament for approval. That is when the amended law goes back to the office of the president. It is strange, really strange, such a claim coming from the office of the president without due process. First of all, if the Somali president wants to amend this law, we welcome. It's a good step forward, but they should come up with a very concrete actions and measures, including to putting a roadmap for how they are going to amend this law, and also they should put a moratorium to the use of this penal code. Let me tell you one thing. Currently, there are two journalists who are being investigated by the Attorney General. One of them is a VOA journalist based in Washington, and one is in Mogadishu. Their cases are based on the criminal cases, and the government is trying to use the criminal code against these journalists. Number two, there is one journalist currently in jail since March 7, and they are trying to use the penal code to sue or to take this journalist to the court, since he hasn't, though he hasn't seen any lawyer, or he hasn't had access to his family. So how can you have the president of Somalia claiming that he is trying to amend or remove the penal code, while his authorities, including the intelligence, including the police, are still using the penal code to persecute journalists? It is like nonsense to me. It is like nonsense to me at all.
And Mumin, whose responsibility it is to ensure that civil and human rights are preserved and protected for each individual, including members of the press, having in mind that they are often assaulted by the police as well as state officials?
Thank you very much. The civil and human rights for the Somali citizens should be preserved under the constitution, meaning that there should be constitutional bodies who are tasked to do this, including the formation of the Somali Human Rights Commission, which hasn't been approved yet, which hasn't been in functioning yet. And unfortunately, since President Mohamed Abdalle Farmajo came to power 3 years and a half now ago, this commission hasn't been yet established, and we are wondering why. Again, within the media and the rights to be preserved, there should be also the Commission of Somali Press Commission. This hasn't been also established, and the reason is that there is a very draconian and aggressive media bill currently before the office of the president. And we have been protesting against this media bill a long time ago, quite trying to highlight that this media bill is very aggressive against the media. It puts banishment measures against the journalists for writing critical on the government. So the government doesn't seem that they want to have some kind of solution for the rights, the human and civil rights of the Somali citizens to be preserved. We, on our end, we are ready to provide our support. We are ready to work with the government on every angle, on every end possible, that is trying to put some solution and some support so that the journalists are safe and that the media can work in a safe environment, but also the ethical code of the media and the journalists should be protected. And one thing that we think that this should be done is through the Somali Press Commission, which should be independent, constitutional, approved by the parliament, and totally independent from the government interference. That's what we believe.
We know that multiple actors continue to target the Somali media and its professionals through continued attacks, arbitrary arrests, death threats, and obstruction of access to information. Why do you think, as the leader of Somali Journalist Syndicate, a union of Somali journalists, why do you think officials are aiding in raiding and shattering media stations across Somalia?
Good question. The raid and the closure against the media houses were on the rise, particularly in south and central part of the country and also in Puntland. There have been also some cases in Somaliland, though. In Somalia, the majority of the cases were the authorities, especially the security forces, were always trying to respond to critical reporting from these media houses. We have a case in Jowhar city in Hirshabelle where radio station was raided by the police on the 17th of December 2019, and that media house remains shattered until today. That's more than now 5 months. The only reason for shattering that radio station in Jowhar was after it reported a local community who complained against the AU forces, AMISOM forces in Jowhar, and also the office of the president of Hirshabelle state, who forcibly took some farmland from the local community in Jowhar. So whenever there is such critical reporting, whenever there is a complaint from the local people against the government, the police are the ones who come on the front line to respond to these cases. And the only action they do is that they shutter and they close the media. In Mogadishu, there was a case in March 30, 2019, where the police raided Universal TV and also made some shooting, aggressive shooting, and endangered the lives of more than 11 journalists who were on duty that day. The only reason that the police and the government could provide was that these people were coming from tax revenue office, which was not quite logic for that such action. Shooting the media house because of collecting revenue was not something logic. We have demanded an investigation into this case, and yet the government has not responded to this kind of investigation. We have several cases where media houses were threatened, including Somali cable TV 2 weeks now ago, where the NISA officers raided during the night when the journalists were trying to do their night coverage of news coverage. And though they haven't yet given a clear understanding of why the officers raided the office of Somali Cable TV in Mogadishu, there is unfortunately at least one journalist who had slightly injured on the left hand. And we were still trying to follow up this case because we want to understand why authorities are continuously targeting. But in general, let me say this. The Somali journalists are active and trying to cover every angle of news stories, including corruption allegations, including abuses on human rights, abuses on children and the women in Somalia. And these are red light for the Somali police and the Somali authorities.
And now on a very important matter, 2020 calendar year is very important for Somalia, its political landscape and the press. 2020 is an electioneering year. Probably this year or next year, 2021, we expect a general election to be held in the country. This is a time when journalists across the country are required to maintain professionalism and responsible reporting ahead of the upcoming regional and national elections in the country, as well as staying aware from any activities that will endanger their safety. What is your message to journalists who will be covering the election, as well as to the electoral body, which has been accused severally of limiting journalists' access to information at the main tallying center?
Thank you very much. That was our call last year, but we had also another call on March 13 this year. And yes, we are still sticking to that call because we want the Somali journalists to play their role, which is very critical and which is very important to the Somali people. We want the journalists to make sure that free and fair election is taking place in this country. And the only way to do this, to make sure this, is through the media, which is independent from all interference from all sides. We want to see that journalists are taking their duties without fear or favor. This is what we want to remain our journalists who are brave, who are reporting from every corner of this country, who are trying to feed very important news stories taking place in the country because of they want to feed the public with human interest stories. So yes, we want to remind them journalists should remain professional and independent from all sides. Journalists should also make sure that the rights of the minority communities are respected and well represented during the election, including the representation of Somali women. And there is a quota allocation for women, which is 30% of the Somali parliament, which hasn't been yet reached. But my role as the Secretary General of Somali Journalists want to assure and to tell my colleagues of journalists every corner of the country that they should be critically reporting on these things. They should try to highlight the importance of Somali women and that they should make sure that no Somali woman who wants to fight for any position is left behind. This is very important time, and this is important because we have a very strong media. That's why I am very happy to be with my Somali colleagues and that I have this kind of belief that this election will be possibly free and fair election because we have the media, which is the watchdog, and media should be given access. I had also another call with the Somali National Independent Electoral Commission telling and reminding them that they should provide free access to all media houses and their journalists, including to providing unrestricted identification cards to the journalists so that they remain free to report from all polling stations and that they can have access to the results of the polling stations so that media can have a good and professional reporting during the election.
And lastly, it is indeed encouraging that the number of journalists murdered in Somalia reportedly has declined in recent years. However, it's unfortunate that Somalia in 2019 was ranked for the 5th year in a row on CPJ's Global Impunity Index as the world's worst country in terms of failing to prosecute murders of journalists as well as members of the press. Why is that the case, and what do you hope the future holds for Somali journalists and the media fraternity in Somalia?
To start with the last question, I hope so. Yes, that's what we are trying to achieve, including to putting some kind of measures. I think it was October last year when we had such discussion about putting a task force for the safety of Somali journalists so that we can make sure that journalists are better trained in security-wise, but also authorities, including the police, the Attorney General, the courts, the Justice Ministry, all these authorities should have some kind of role in the protection of the safety and the rights of the journalists. This is also good for the Somali government and the Somali authorities in general because they want also to see the country becoming safe enough for journalists to operate. For the previous question, Somalia was on the top list in the past 5 years in a row to be the worst place where the killers of the journalists go free, unbanished. And why this was happening? Because there were no honest and criminal investigation into the all killings against the journalists. If we go back into the data since 1992, it shows a very shocking number, about 69 journalists murdered in the country in different places because of only that they were journalists and they were reporting very important issues. Our call to the government recently was also including that they should assign a special prosecutor for investigating and making sure that the perpetrators are taken to the court and prosecuted for all the murder cases against the journalists. Yes, I agree that there was some kind of decline in the number of the murdered journalists in the past 2 or 3 years. Because I think the awareness of the journalists during the past 3 years in safety-wise was somehow increased because of the trainings that we had been undertaking or other partners had been doing. But also, this could be quite number of journalists are running the country. That could be also a good reason for the decline. But what we want to say is that in 2019, 2 journalists were killed in July in Kismayo. And this year, unfortunately, already so far, we have lost 2 colleagues, and both of them were murdered. One was murdered in February 16, Abdalle Ahmed Mumin in Afgoye, and no one has been arrested for this murder yet, though we are still calling and pressuring the government to do something to investigate the case. Another journalist was killed just a day after the World Press Freedom Day in Mogadishu, stabbed to death, and we are not yet understanding the motive of this killing. But what we want to see is that the government takes its responsibility and investigates genuinely all these cases. And we want to see that perpetrators are not going anymore or free. There's also another case where a police officer shot dead a journalist in Mogadishu in July 2018. This police officer is still at large. He hasn't been arrested, though there is a court order ordering his arrest. What we want to say the government is that they should also arrest this police officer, and they should make sure that the family of the murdered journalist gets good justice. That's what we want to see. That is, I think, how Somalia can come out clean out of the long list of the killer journalists, and we want to see the environment becoming quite safer for the journalists, but also that doesn't mean the situation is becoming good. The situation is becoming worse coming the election and during the pandemic. We want to remind the journalists they need to stay safe. They need to make sure that they are making proper safety mechanism whenever they are going out for reporting.
Thank you very much, Mumin, and we hope that the future holds well for Somali journalists. And that was the Secretary General of the Somali Journalists Syndicate speaking to us here on CBA News on our program Talk to CBA, where we feature representatives of different institutions and bodies to get different perspectives of issues we think that are of interest to our audience. Thank you very much for being with us. My name is Eunice Deco. On behalf of all those who made this broadcast program possible, thank you for being with us. Remember, CBA TV is Horn of Africa's leading television and the first to broadcast in English. You can get these news, programs, and much more by visiting our social media platforms on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. You can also visit our website, www.cbatv.net. Until we meet again, have a lovely time and enjoy the rest of your viewing.